And this is the sign at the southern tip of South America on the Beagle Channel. It's either the start or the end of the Pan American Highway, which goes all the way to Alaska, right up the spine of North America and South America. The two motorcycles you can see in the picture are a couple of Spaniards who had just completed riding the entire length of the highway. So this is called the post office at the end of the world. This is a small wooden building at the end of the pier on the Beagle Channel. And there's a close-up of the door going in. You can actually mail stuff from here, just it's a regular post office. And the sign above the door basically says end of the world. So it's Ushuaia on the Beagle Channel, Beagle Canal. So here is the postmaster at work. This is the current post office employee, Carlos, and he's checking the rate on my postcard. And basically, because you've got a tour bus full of people all wanting to mail postcards, you go in and Carlos looks at where it's going, tells you how much it's going to cost. You give him the money, and then he throws it into a pile to put the stamps on it later because they want to get everybody moved through the line. So here is the postcard that I sent from the end of the world. See, I don't know if I can move this. I guess I can. Okay. From Ushuaia, the $265 Argentine pesos is about $5 from in Canadian dollars. So now we're off to the Drake Passage. This is a stretch of water between the South American continents and the South Shetland Islands of Antarctica, and is considered the roughest in the world. We were lucky. The waves on our southbound journey were only 1 to 3 meters, but this is the stretch of water that the ancient mariners used to dread. Nobody wanted to go around the Drake. You probably remember that from your public school history classes. But we were quite fortunate. In fact, I had lunch with a friend prior to the cruise, and he had been to Antarctica about a year before. And when they were crossing the Drake, they ran into 45-foot waves, which I guess is 15 meters now. Unfortunately, there were 2 people on board that were injured going down a stairwell, and their injuries were so severe they had to sail back to Ushuaia in order to get the medical attention. And because at the time it took them to get back to Ushuaia, they were not able to go to set sail again for Antarctica. And the captain told them it was probably a good thing because a real storm was moving in. So as a consolation, they got to go to the Falkland Islands, which nobody was impressed with. So he did not get to Antarctica. So that was one of the fears I had. And I think there was a presentation a number of years ago to the UCW where somebody talked about sailing to Antarctica. And they had a smooth crossing one way and a very rough crossing the other way. And I was between and betwixt as to whether I wanted to experience a rough crossing. And fortunately, on the way over, we did not have a rough crossing. So this is a short video, the rocking and the rolling of the small waves as we sailed through the Drake Passage. Palm Bay on the Drake Strait. So this is one of the first icebergs that we ran into. Well, came across, I'll say. We didn't actually run into it. The crew estimated this one at 50 meters high and over 1 kilometer wide, and it would weigh in at about 1.3 million tons. And you need to remember that with icebergs, 80% of it is below water. So this is absolutely a massive piece of ice. And this is us sailing by the side. Fortunately, the captain decided not to play Titanic. This was the first port that we landed at. This is Port Lockroy. It's a British base. It's Antarctica's most popular tourist destination, and it's a unique British post office located in the heart of Antarctic Peninsula. It's about 700 miles south of Argentina and Chile. Before, every landing that we had in Antarctica was by Zodiac. And because they're trying to ensure that there's no invasive species taken onto the peninsula, we had to walk through disinfectant before we went into the Zodiacs. And then again, we had to walk through the disinfectant when we got back, basically get the penguin poo off our boots. I'll get into the Zodiacs a little later. Well, I guess I'm going to do it now. So here's a Zodiac. The ship had 10 of them, and there's 10 people in the Zodiac plus the driver. Under the Antarctic Treaty, no more than 100 people may be on shore at any given time. So we had 170 people on board our ship. So we had 2 separate landings. They'd send 10 Zodiacs over with 10 people, and then as they came back, others would come. And all the landings we had in Antarctica were wet landings. You can see one of the guides there with the yellow jacket on, standing in about a foot of water. And we would get out of the Zodiacs and into that water to walk onto shore. So this was established as a British research station in 1944. And since 2006, it's now a museum, gift shop, and post office run by the UK Antarctica Heritage Trust. And even before the COVID-19 rules hit, only 12 people are allowed inside this building at any one time. So when you've got 100 people on land and everybody wants to get inside here, you're not supposed to spend very much time. What the cruise did was anybody who wanted to mail a postcard gave it to the cruise hospitality desk, and they brought them over en masse so that nobody needed to line up at the post office and nobody needed to buy postcards in the building. It was all done on the cruise ship before we finally got here. You see a few of the penguins wandering around. So this is Penguin Post. There's approximately 18,000 annual visitors to this base, and they mail about 80,000 postcards a year. The staff says they handle about 1,000 postcards a day. So what happens to mail when you deposit it in the Penguin Post Office? Sending a postcard to the US costs $1 US no matter where the destination. The team frank the mail by hand, and on a busy day, there can be more than 1,000 postcards. It's then bundled, weighed, and almost 500 kilograms of mail is processed by the team each season, bagged and transported to the Falkland Islands by an expedition ship, weather and ice permitting. Every postcard has quite a journey before reaching its final destination. Once the bagged mail reaches the Falklands, the Stanley Post Office puts it on the weekly Royal Air Force plane to the UK, where it finally enters regular postal service. The fastest a postcard can travel from Point Lochroy to Cambridge is just over 2 weeks. However, it often takes longer, as the mail may not leave us for a week or two after it's dropped in the box. And at the end of season, no ships return to the Falklands, so if you visit Port Lochroy after mid-February, your mail will mostly wait until next season to go. So here's a picture off the internet of the inside of the post office. This is taken from one wall looking to the other wall. And where that fellow is standing, that's he's standing at the post office counter. There's only one island there with souvenirs to buy. It's not very big. So here's the cover that I mailed from Port Lochroy. Postage was 2 airmail postcard stamps from the British Antarctic Territory, about $2.50 Canadian, but the ship charged us €5. For stamp collectors out there, there was no additional franking or postmarks from its long voyage. Back in the earlier days when letters traveled like this, each receiving post office would have put their postmark on it, stamped it either on the front or on the reverse of the envelope, but it no longer happens. So you can't tell where the leather has been now. That's just a close-up of the stamps and the postmark. And the crest, or the photocopy of the crest, is one the cruise company gave us as a memento of the trip expedition to Antarctica. So wandering through the museum, they had a number of stamp panels that they had put up. And this is the set of stamps that was issued on February the 12th, 1944 from Port Lockroy. They were Falkland Island stamps that were overprinted with Graham Land dependency. And the Graham Land was the name for this part of Antarctic Peninsula when it formed part of the Falkland Island dependencies. And this is an early cover with those stamps on it, postmarked December the 9th, 1944. And the first mail was stamped aboard a ship in Port Lockroy with Falkland Island stamps overprinted with Graham Land dependency of, and franked either the 12th or 14th of February 1944. That's when the first issues were out, as the 13th was a Sunday and the post office was shut. And then after the Antarctic Treaty was enacted in 1961, the Falkland Island dependencies issued stamps under the British Antarctic Territory. One of the things I'm interested in this presentation is to see if there's any other closet stamp collectors at Jubilee besides the couple that I know. Here's another set of the first Falkland Island dependency stamps that were issued to replace the overprinted ones. These were issued in 1946, and these replaced the 1944 overprinted stamps. And philatelists are always keen to get mail from a remote post office. And an entry in the base diary says, the relative politeness of the American and English stamp collectors afforded considerable interest, the former winning hands down. It's hard to believe in today's world that the people at the base thought Americans were more polite than the British, but it just shows to go you. Many of the British colonies issued what were called omnibus issues, where every colony issued the same stamp. The only difference was the denominations put on them and the name of the colony. So this was an omnibus issued October 10th, 1944, in commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Postal Union. So here's what makes up the Falkland Island dependencies. Up at the top of the screen, you can see the Falkland Islands. Here's Port Lockroy. These are the South Shetland Islands. And the South Shetland Islands are about 3,600 square kilometers. They've got a population of about 500 people, and they're about 120 kilometers north of the Antarctic Peninsula. And then you have the South Orkney Islands. They're about 600 square kilometers, a population of 55 in the summer and 14 in the winter. And they're 600, a little over 600 kilometers northeast of the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. And then you have South Georgia Island, which is about 3,500 kilometers north, and it's got a population of 30. So there are not many people here that are going to need to use stamps. The first stamps were issued, as I said, in 1944, overprinted on Falkland Island stamps. And from 1946 to 1963, South Georgia used the stamps of the Falkland Island dependencies. And in 1963, the British Antarctic Territory was formed, leaving only the island groups of South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands in the Falkland Island dependencies. And that was because the Antarctic Treaty set a limit as to how far north it would go, and the line went right between the South Shetlands and South Orkneys. So South Georgia became the only Falkland Island dependency after that. So from 63 to 1979, South Georgia had its own stamp, simply marked South Georgia. From 1980 to 85, it used stamps from the Falkland Island dependencies, and from 1985 on, it again used stamps for the Falkland Island dependencies. Or rather, it used South Georgia stamps, which now say South Georgia and the Sandwich Islands. So here are the South Shetland stamps and the South Georgia stamps with the overprints on the Falkland Island stamps, and these would have been used in 1944. And these are the South Orkney overprints, the same set, just with South Orkney dependency out the Falkland Islands overprinted on them. So the weather we experienced in our Antarctic trip was exceptional. Generally, Antarctic will get 6 sunny days a season, which runs from mid-November to early March. And in the week we were down there, we had 3 sunny days. So I won't say it was unheard of, but it was gorgeous for us. The landscape, I found pictures just don't do justice to the landscape. The vastness could not be covered in a single photo. And many times I just left my camera in my pocket and enjoyed the ride out on the ship. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. Looking at something like that, you're looking at land that chances are nobody has ever walked on. And here's more mountains. And it just, I mean, you're sailing through this crystal blue water and the snow is just so white. This is a picture of a moonrise. I wasn't quite as patient as some of the other photographers on board. And they actually got a shot of the moon sitting on the peak of the mountain. So it looked like a golf ball up on a tee. Penguins. Under the Antarctic Treaty, you're required to stay 15 meters away from all wildlife, but the penguins did not obey the rules. As you can see, there's many number of penguins here. This was taken at Port Lockroy, just outside the post office. There were thousands of penguins, primarily because it was molting season, so they were on land. And when a penguin is molting, it basically just stands there, which is why they want you to keep 15 meters away, because they don't want them to be stressed, because they're not feeding while they're molting. And I can't remember the exact number of days or weeks it takes for them to molt, but it's pretty significant. The number that's in my mind is 6 weeks, but that just doesn't sound right. So more penguins. These are Gen 2 penguins. They were the most common ones that we saw. Wildlife other than penguins, we saw many types of seals. And this is a leopard seal that was sitting on an ice floe. There's another seal, and they're in molting season as well. They're not very attractive when they're in molting season. And again, they just lie there and they don't feed. They just molt. Birds, several cormorants. And Antarctica is famous for old whaling stations. Many times we landed, you'd be in a whale bone graveyard, because they would just haul the whales up on land and strip them down, and all that's left today are the bones sitting there to decay. We did see several humpbacks. In fact, one night we were sitting at dinner, we were fortunate enough to have a window seat, and a mother humpback and her calf actually swam alongside the boat right beside our window. Naturally, I did not have a camera ready. So before we return to the Drake, I'll just mention that our weather was absolutely exceptional. Normally, when people do Antarctic expeditions, there are usually 10 landings scheduled. They do one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And when you do a landing, your ship is the only one in the vicinity. They only allow one ship at each landing point. So we would leave, we'd go to a landing point in the morning and leave, and then another ship would come to that same landing point in the afternoon. Normally when you're reading brochures, they expect that you'll make 6 to 8 of your landings due to weather and other issues. We actually made 11. that we had such a smooth crossing coming across the Drake on the way down. We got there early, and they just gave us a Zodiac tour around some ice floes to take a look at some seals and penguins before we, just north of the peninsula. And then we got all 10 of our landings we managed to get in. And then coming back, MC says it was because the captain had his son on board. But we were very fortunate on our northbound sailing. The waters were even calmer than what we went down on. It was unusually calm waters. A normal sailing is about 48 hours. We did it in 36. So as a bonus, the captain took us to Cape Horn, which is that notorious stretch of water around South America that the mariners all fear. So doing this, our captain had a very open bridge policy. You can go on the bridge at any time, providing you didn't have the red sign out, which meant there was something important happening on. So as we rounded Cape Horn, I was actually on the bridge, and I was talking with one of the officers, and I said, "This must be unusual weather for the Cape." And he replied that this was the first time in 2 years that they had done this. So we were incredibly very fortunate with the weather we experienced both in Antarctica and sailing the Drake both times and coming around Cape Horn. So that's the end of my presentation. This is a different type of penguin. This is what they refer to as a chin strap penguin. And I think you can tell because of the little chin strap he's got around. We only saw about 3 or 4 of these. They weren't very common in the areas we were going to. So Norm, I will turn it back to you. I will stop my sharing and see if I can handle any questions and see if I remember anything that I forgot to tell people.